The titans of old are awakening once again, ready to reclaim their place in a world that has grown cold and mechanical. Witness the epic scale of our latest series, where legends return to the light of day. Click subscribe now and be there for the return.
Text came through while I was standing in the produce section at the Kroger on Belmont, holding 2 cantaloupes and trying to decide which one was less bruised. That's the part I keep coming back to, not the words themselves, but where I was when I read them. A grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon, fluorescent lighting, some country song playing low over the speakers. A normal day in the middle of a normal week, and then my phone buzzed, and everything I thought I knew about my family rearranged itself. You're out of the wedding. Honestly, it's been awkward having you involved. The ceremony is for real family only. I'm sure you understand. I read it 3 times. I put the cantaloupes back. I stood there for what must have been a full minute, just blinking at the screen, my cart blocking the aisle, while an old man with a walker tried to scoot around me and muttered something I didn't catch. The text was from my stepsister. Her name is Brielle, and she had been engaged for 14 months, and during those 14 months, I'd personally written checks for the venue deposit, the catering contract, the photographer's retainer, the rehearsal dinner at the steakhouse downtown, the florist's initial 50%, and a deposit on the boutique hotel block for out-of-town guests. I had spent, give or take, $41,000 of my own money. Not loaned. Not clown-signed. Paid. I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you because context matters, and the context is that 10 minutes before I got that text, I had been at the bakery picking up the sample tier of her wedding cake so she could approve the buttercream. The box was still in my cart. Lemon elderflower. 3 layers. She had been agonizing over the flavor for weeks and asked me to handle the tasting since she was, quote, too overwhelmed to deal with vendors right now. My name is Sandra. I'm 31. I work in commercial real estate analysis, which is a fancy way of saying I look at numbers all day and tell people whether a building is worth what they want to pay for it. I'm good at it. I make a comfortable salary, the kind that lets you say yes when your stepmother calls crying because the deposit deadline is tomorrow and your stepsister doesn't have it. The kind that lets you say yes again 3 months later when the same call comes about the catering, and again about the photographer, and again until at some point you stop noticing you're the one paying for the whole thing because everyone around you has stopped noticing too. My dad married Vivienne when I was 19. My mom had died of ovarian cancer when I was 16, and for 3 years it was just me and Dad in our house in Cary, eating frozen lasagna and pretending we were okay. Then he met Vivienne at a work function, and within a year she and her 2 daughters moved in. Brielle was 14 at the time. Her younger sister, Caroline, was 12. I want to be fair here. Vivienne was kind to me in the beginning. She made an effort. She'd save me magazine clippings about colleges. She'd remember my birthday. She'd ask about my classes. The girls were polite enough in that careful teenage way where you can tell they've been coached. We weren't close, but we were enemies. We were strangers learning to share a refrigerator. Then my dad died. Heart attack, sudden, in the garage. He was 58. I was 24. And something shifted. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't even within the first year. It was slow, the way mold spreads. After Dad's funeral, Vivienne told me the house was technically hers now, which I didn't dispute, because Dad had put her on the deed when they married. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Raleigh and started my career. And at first we still did holidays together. Thanksgiving at the house. Christmas brunch. Easter when I could make it. But somewhere around year 3 after Dad died, I noticed something. I was the one driving over for the holidays, not the other way around. I was the one bringing the wine and the side dishes and the gifts. Vivienne started referring to Brielle and Caroline as my girls when introducing the family to other people. And I was introduced, when I was introduced at all, as my late husband's daughter. Not stepdaughter. Not even daughter. Just a footnote to a man who wasn't there anymore. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself grief made me read into things. I kept showing up. I kept paying for things. Because Vivienne had started a habit of mentioning money troubles whenever I came over. And I had inherited some of my mom's life insurance, and it felt good to help. It felt like I was still part of something. When Brielle got engaged to her fiancé, a guy named Reeves who worked in pharmaceutical sales, Vivienne called me crying within a week. Honey, we want to give her the wedding she deserves, but you know, things have been tight since your father passed. Would you ever consider helping us out? Just the deposits? Just to get things rolling? I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was my stepsister. I'd watched her grow up. I'd been in the same house when she got her braces off, when she went to prom, when she got her college acceptance letter. I cared about her. I wanted her to have a beautiful day. The first deposit was for the venue, a historic inn out near Pittsburgh. Gorgeous place, the kind of stone and ivy estate that books 2 years out. $12,000. I wired it that afternoon. Within a month, the catering deposit, $8,000. Then the photographer, $4,000. Then the videographer, $3,000. The florist wanted a 50% commitment to lock in the date, and that was another $6,000. The rehearsal dinner venue needed a hold fee. The cake tasting fee. The dress alterations. Brielle decided she wanted custom invitations from a stationer in Charleston, and those were $900 just for the proofs. Every time, Vivienne would call. Sometimes Brielle would call. The script was always the same. Just this one thing. Just this one thing. We'll figure out the rest. You're such a blessing. We don't know what we'd do without you. I kept paying because I didn't know how to stop. I kept paying because somewhere inside me I was still that 19-year-old whose father had just remarried, watching 3 women I barely knew unpack their boxes in my house, hoping they'd want me too, hoping I'd belong. So when I read the text in the Kroger that afternoon, holding a cake box and 2 cantaloupes I didn't end up buying, the first feeling wasn't anger. The first feeling was confusion. I genuinely thought it was sent by mistake. I thought maybe she meant to send it to someone else, some distant cousin she was uninviting for space reasons. I typed back, I think you might have texted the wrong person. The bubble came up immediately. She'd been waiting. No, Sandra, I sent it to you on purpose. Mom and I talked. Honestly, you've been making everything about you lately. The whole vibe is off when you're around. The bridal party feels weird. Reeves's family asked who you were, and it was awkward to explain. We just want the ceremony to be intimate. Blood family only. You get it, right? Reeves's family. The family I'd never met because Brielle had specifically asked me to skip the engagement party because, quote, his parents were Southern Baptist and didn't really understand blended families. I stood there in the aisle and felt something in my chest go very, very quiet. I didn't cry. I want to say that because I think it's important. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't text back something nasty. I just stood there and let the words land, and then I let them land again, and then a third time. Then I picked up my phone and I typed back 4 letters. Fine. I left the cake on the shelf. I left the cart in the aisle. I walked out to the parking lot, got in my car, and sat behind the wheel for about 10 minutes without turning the key. I wasn't thinking about revenge yet. I was thinking about the last 12 years. Every dinner, every check, every Christmas I'd driven over with a trunk full of gifts. Every time I'd talked myself out of feeling like a guest in my own family. And the math was so clean, so obvious. I'd been buying my way into a room that had a sign on the door, and the sign had been there the whole time, and I just refused to read it. I drove home. I made a cup of tea. I sat at my kitchen island and opened my laptop. Here is what I did over the next 4 hours. I called the inn first. I'd been the one to sign the contract. My name was on every line. The card on file was mine. I told the events coordinator, a woman named Margaret who had been delightful through the whole process, that there had been a change of plans and I needed to cancel the booking. She apologized profusely and explained the deposit was non-refundable, which I already knew. That was fine. I wasn't trying to get the money back. I was just trying to make sure the date was no longer held. Margaret asked if I wanted to leave the date open in case we wanted to rebook. I said no. I said I'd like the date released back into general availability effective immediately. She paused, then said, Of course, Miss Sandra. I'll send a confirmation email. The email came through within 20 minutes. The September 14th date at the Ellsworth Inn was now publicly available. I saved the email to a folder I labeled, very calmly, Wedding Documentation. Then I called the caterer. Same story. My contract, my card, I canceled. They were less gracious than Margaret. They reminded me 3 times that the deposit was forfeit. I told them 3 times that I understood. The cancellation was processed, then the photographer, then the videographer, then the florist who actually tried to argue with me until I asked her to please pull up the contract and look at the signature line. Silence on the other end. Then a stiff, I'll process that for you, ma'am. I canceled the rehearsal dinner reservation. I canceled the hotel block. I called the stationer in Charleston and stopped the print run on the invitations which hadn't gone out yet. I called the bakery very politely and explained that the order under my name would not be needed. Every cancellation, I asked for written confirmation, email, fax, whatever they had. By 6 p.m. that evening, I had a folder with 23 documents in it, every single one confirming that the wedding scheduled for September 14th was no longer happening, at least not at any of the venues or with any of the venues I had paid for. I did not text Brielle. I did not call Vivienne. I did not send a single word. I made myself a salad. I watched 2 episodes of a show I'd been meaning to start. I went to bed at 10:30 and I slept better than I had in months. The wedding was 9 weeks away. For 3 days, nothing. I half expected the dam to break the next morning, but it didn't. I assume what happened is that they were busy congratulating themselves on having handled me and didn't think to check on the vendors because the vendors had always been my problem. It was Friday afternoon when Vivienne called. I let it go to voicemail. She called twice more. Then Brielle called. Then Vivienne again. 8 calls between 5 and 7 p.m. I listened to the first voicemail while I was making dinner. Sandra. Honey. We have a situation. The Ellsworth Inn just called and said our date was cancelled, which doesn't make any sense. Can you call them and sort this out? You're the one who set everything up, so I'm sure it's some kind of mix-up. Call me back as soon as you get this. The second voicemail, an hour later, was less sweet. Sandra, what is going on? The caterer just emailed Brielle and said the contract was cancelled at the client's request. Did you do this? Please tell me you didn't do this. This isn't funny. The third one, Brielle herself, screaming, Are you kidding me right now? Are you actually kidding me right now? Are you actually kidding me? The florist just refunded $0 because you cancelled. I am getting married in 9 weeks. Mom is having a panic attack. You need to fix this right now, or I swear to God, I deleted them all. I ate my dinner. Pesto pasta. It was very good. Around 9 p.m., I texted Brielle a single message. Real family is handling the wedding. That's what you wanted. Best of luck. Then I blocked her number. I blocked Vivienne. I blocked Caroline, who hadn't done anything specifically but had been part of the group chat where they discussed me, which I would only find out about later. The next morning, I got an email from my dad's cousin, my Aunt Lurleen, who lived in Asheville and who I hadn't spoken to in maybe 2 years. The subject line was, Are you okay, sweetheart? I opened it and started crying for the first time since the Kroger. Aunt Lurleen had gotten a frantic call from Vivienne the night before, asking if she'd seen me or heard from me, and saying that I had some kind of breakdown and destroyed the wedding out of jealousy. Aunt Lurleen, who had loved my father and who had quietly noticed things over the years, was not buying it. She wrote me a long email asking what really happened and reminding me that she and my Uncle Ferris loved me and that Dad would have been proud of me no matter what was going on. I called her. We talked for 2 hours. I told her everything. The text, the cancellations, the 12 years of paying my way into rooms I was never welcome in. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Honey, you know your daddy used to worry about that woman, right? Toward the end. He told your uncle once that he wasn't sure she'd ever really seen you. He felt bad about it. I had not known that. I sat in my kitchen with the phone pressed against my ear and let those words settle into me like rain into dry ground. That weekend, Aunt Lurleen drove down to see me. She brought a casserole and a bottle of wine and her own quiet, sturdy presence, and she sat at my kitchen island and listened to me talk for hours about everything I'd been carrying. By Sunday afternoon, I felt like a person again. A person with edges. A person who could say no. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I thought the wedding would happen on some scaled-down version, the family would tell their version of the story, and we'd all just move on with our separate lives. That would have been fine. That would have been a clean ending. But then, 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Reeves, the fiancé. I almost didn't answer it. I'm glad I did. Sandra, this is Reeves. Please don't hang up. I know I'm probably the last person you want to talk to. I need to ask you some questions, and I think you're the only person who'll tell me the truth. His voice was shaking, not angry. Hurt. There's a difference, and I caught it immediately. Okay, I said. I'm listening. He told me everything. He told me that Brielle had told him I was mentally unwell and had always been jealous of her and had destroyed our wedding out of spite. He told me his parents had been on the phone all week, furious, asking how this could possibly have happened. He told me his own credit had been pulled because Brielle had panicked and tried to put new deposits on his card without telling him, and there wasn't enough credit available. And now they were arguing about money for the first time in their relationship. But none of that was why he was calling. I went to your apartment building yesterday, he said. I'm sorry. I know that's weird. I needed to see you weren't, like, in some psych ward or whatever Brielle was saying. The front desk wouldn't let me up. But on the way out, I ran into your neighbor, an older lady, and I mentioned your name and she said the sweetest things about you. She said you helped her with her groceries every week. She said you were the kindest person in the building. He paused. I could hear him breathing. And I just thought, that doesn't sound like the person Brielle has been describing for the last 14 months. So I'm calling to ask you, why did you cancel everything? I told him. I told him about the text. I told him about the $41,000. I told him about being introduced as my late husband's daughter. I told him about Aunt Lurleen and what my father had said before he died. I told him I wasn't asking him to do anything with the information. I wasn't trying to break up his wedding. I was just answering his question because he had asked me honestly, and I was tired of lying about myself to make other people comfortable. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know. We hung up. I didn't think I'd hear from him again. But 3 days later, the local paper ran a small notice in the engagement section, a retraction. Brielle and Reeves were no longer engaged. I found out the rest in pieces, from Aunt Lurleen, who somehow always knew things. Reeves had gone home that night and laid out for Brielle everything he'd learned. He'd asked her, point blank, why she'd lied to him about her own stepsister, about the money, about the family dynamics, about why my name had never once been mentioned in their premarital counseling. She'd melted down. According to Aunt Lurleen's source, she'd screamed that I was nothing, that I had no right to be involved, that I'd inserted myself into the family because I had no one else. She'd said things about my mother. She'd said things about my father. Reeves had listened to all of it. Then he'd taken off the ring, set it on the kitchen counter, and walked out. The wedding didn't happen. Not in September, not ever. At least not to him. I heard later that Brielle and Vivienne tried to spin it as Reeves being the problem, but his family had heard enough by then, and they made sure their version of events got around. The Ellsworth Inn's September 14th date had been booked by another couple within 2 weeks of the cancellation. The caterer had moved on. The photographer had taken a destination wedding instead. I didn't go to any kind of celebration. I didn't post anything. I didn't reach back out to Brielle or Vivienne, and they didn't reach out to me. The blocks have stayed in place. It's been almost 2 years now. The last thing I want to tell you is this. About 6 months after everything, I was in the same Kroger on Belmont, picking up some chicken thighs for dinner. I was standing in the produce section, exactly where I'd been standing that day, and I had this strange moment of standing outside myself and looking at the woman I'd been a year and a half earlier. The woman holding the cantaloupes. The woman who would have done anything to stay in a family that had already decided she wasn't part of one. I don't hate her. She was doing her best with what she had. She was grieving a mother and a father and a whole imagined version of belonging that was never going to come. But I'm grateful I'm not her anymore. I have Aunt Lurleen and Uncle Ferris now, and I drive up to Asheville for holidays. I have 2 close friends from work who I trust with the real stuff. I have a savings account that's grown back faster than I expected, and I have a small house I bought last spring with a porch that faces east, and on Saturday mornings I drink my coffee out there and watch the light come up. The $41,000 is gone. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't sting sometimes. But I think about it now as the price of an education. I paid $41,000 to learn that you cannot purchase a place at someone's table. You can only accept the chair you're offered, and if no chair is offered, you can build your own. I built my own. It has room for the people who actually pull it up to sit beside me. And those people, the ones who showed up without being paid to, the ones who asked how I was and meant it, they are my real family. The rest of it was always just a receipt. I think about that afternoon in the produce section more than I should. Not because it haunts me, but because it taught me something I had been refusing to learn for over a decade. Every check I wrote to Vivienne, every vendor I paid on Brielle's behalf, every holiday I drove an hour to attend uninvited in spirit, if not in name, I was answering a question nobody had asked me. I was trying to prove I deserved a chair at a table where the chairs had already been counted. And when you spend 12 years answering a question nobody asked, eventually the people around you stop hearing you at all. They just see the money. They stop seeing you. What happened to Brielle and Vivienne wasn't something I did to them. That part matters to me. I didn't poison the well. I didn't lie. I didn't sabotage anything that wasn't legally mine to cancel. All I did was stop carrying weight that was never mine in the first place, and the structure collapsed because the structure had always been me. When Reeves called and asked me a question honestly, I answered him honestly. The rest unfolded because Brielle had built her entire engagement on a story that couldn't survive sunlight. That isn't karma in some mystical sense. That's just what happens when you build something out of lies. Eventually, the wind blows. The wisdom part, the part I'm still learning, is that being kind and being used are not the same thing. And I had been confusing them for so long I'd forgotten there was a difference. Kindness has a spine. Kindness can say no. Kindness can pay for one nephew's braces without funding an entire wedding for a person who introduces you as a footnote. Generosity without boundaries isn't generosity. It's a transaction where you keep buying something the seller never intended to deliver. The strength part took longer. For a long time after, I waited for the regret to hit me. I kept expecting a moment of weakness, where I'd want to call Vivienne back, apologize for something I hadn't done, slip back into the role I knew. That moment hasn't come. What came instead was a slower, sturdier feeling, the feeling of being a person whose word means something to herself. When I say no now, I mean it. When I say yes, I mean that too. There's a piece in that I didn't know existed when I was busy being everyone's emergency fund. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in any of it, the woman holding the cantaloupes, the one paying for rooms she's not invited into, I want you to know the ground is steadier on this side than you think. You don't have to detonate anything. You just have to stop. Stop paying, stop apologizing, stop translating yourself into a language the other people refuse to learn. Build your own table. The right people will pull up a chair, and the ones who don't, the ones who only came for the receipts, they were never really there to begin with.